black owner mistaken for a bellboy at his own resort. Moments later, the manager is replaced. The Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly beyond the wraparound veranda of the Magnolia Grand Resort, its waves catching the golden afternoon light like scattered diamonds. Spanish moss swayed gently from the ancient oak trees that lined the property, and the sweet scent of jasmine drifted through the humid savanna air. It was the kind of place that whispered old Southern charm and new money, exactly the type of investment Marcus Bell had been searching for. Marcus stepped out of his rented Toyota Camry and took a deep breath. At 38, he had learned that first impressions often revealed more than boardroom presentations ever could. That's why he had chosen to arrive like this. No Tesla, no designer luggage, no entourage of assistants. Just him, a simple black duffel bag, and clothes that wouldn't turn a single head. His linen pants were wrinkled from the drive, and his light blue button-up shirt was the kind you could find at any department store. To anyone watching, he looked like exactly what he intended to appear as, a middle-class tourist, maybe a teacher or office worker treating himself to a weekend getaway. Nobody would guess that 3 weeks ago, his venture capital firm had quietly acquired a controlling 65% stake in this very resort. The Magnolia Grand rose before him like a monument to Southern hospitality, its white columns gleaming against red brick, and its emerald lawns perfectly manicured. Guests in tennis white strolled the grounds, their laughter mixing with the distant sound of a jazz quartet. Valets in crisp uniforms glided between luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, and at least 2 Bentleys that Marcus could see. He had done his research, of course. The resort boasted a 97% occupancy rate, 5-star reviews, and a client list that read like a who's who of Atlanta's social elite. On paper, it was a goldmine. But Marcus had learned long ago that paper could lie, especially when it came to company culture and employee satisfaction. That's why he was here incognito. Tomorrow, the board would formally announce the acquisition, and Marcus would step into his role as the new majority owner. But today, he wanted to see what happened when nobody knew who he was. He wanted to observe how the staff was treated, how guests were prioritized, and whether the resort's 5-star reputation extended beyond its marble lobbies and imported chandeliers. Marcus shouldered his duffel bag and walked toward the main entrance. The brass doors gleamed under crystal sconces, and a doorman in white gloves nodded politely as he approached. So far, so good. The lobby took his breath away, not because of its beauty, though it was stunning, but because of its sheer audacity. The ceiling soared 30 feet above, supported by columns that wouldn't have looked out of place in ancient Rome. A waterfall cascaded down one wall into a koi pond, while oil paintings of Confederate generals gazed down from gilded frames. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across cream marble floors, and the sound of a grand piano drifted from the adjacent lounge. "Welcome to the Magnolia Grand," said a young man behind the reception desk. His name tag read, David, and despite his professional smile, Marcus caught the fatigue in his eyes. "How may I assist you today?" "I have a reservation under Bell," Marcus said, setting his bag down beside him. David's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Ah yes, Mr. Bell. We have you in one of our garden view suites for 3 nights. I do hope you'll enjoy your stay with us." As David processed his check-in, Marcus let his gaze wander around the lobby. Near the elevator bank, a woman in a black uniform was quietly polishing brass fixtures, her movements efficient but nearly invisible. By the concierge desk, another uniformed employee was arranging fresh orchids, his hands moving with practiced precision. The guests barely glanced at them. They were part of the scenery, as expected and unnoticed as the marble columns themselves. "Mr. Bell?" Marcus turned back to David, who was holding out a key card. "Your room is ready. Our bellhop service can assist with your luggage if you'd like." "That's all right, I can manage," Marcus said, reaching for his bag. "Excuse me." The voice cut through the lobby's genteel murmur like a blade. Marcus looked up to see a man striding toward them, his movements crisp and purposeful. He was tall and lean, probably in his early 50s, with silver-touched hair styled to perfection and a navy blazer that probably cost more than most people made in a month. His smile was practiced, the kind that never quite reached his eyes, and everything about him screamed old money and older privilege. "I'm Julian Prescott, the resort manager," the man said, extending his hand to Marcus with the kind of firm grip that was meant to establish dominance. "I couldn't help but notice you speaking with our staff." Marcus shook his hand, noting how Julian's gaze quickly assessed his casual clothes and modest luggage. He could practically see the calculations happening behind those pale blue eyes. Middle-class tourist, probably saved for months for this trip, not worth much personal attention. "Just checking in," Marcus said simply. Of course. Julian's smile became more patronizing. "Well, I do hope you enjoy your stay. We pride ourselves on providing an authentic Southern experience." His tone suggested that someone like Marcus should feel grateful just to be here. Before Marcus could respond, the lobby doors burst open with a flourish. A woman in her 60s swept in, dripping with diamonds and attitude, followed by a much younger man who was clearly her trophy husband. She wore a white Chanel suit that probably cost more than a car, and her platinum hair was arranged in a style that hadn't changed since 1985. "Prescott!" she called out, her voice echoing across the marble. "There you are!" Julian's demeanor transformed instantly. His spine straightened, his smile became genuine, and he practically bounded toward the new arrivals like a golden retriever spotting its owner. "Mrs. Whitmore! What a delightful surprise!" Julian gushed, taking the woman's bejeweled hand in both of his. "I wasn't expecting you until next week." "Change of plans, darling. The yacht club was simply dreadful this morning. Can you believe they're allowing just anyone to join these days?" She gestured dismissively with her free hand. "Charles and I decided we needed some real luxury. But of course, we'll have the presidential suite prepared immediately." Julian snapped his fingers, and David jumped to attention. "And I'll personally ensure that everything is exactly as you prefer." Marcus watched this performance with growing interest. The contrast was striking. Julian's cool professionalism with him versus his fawning attention to Mrs. Whitmore. It was a masterclass in selective service, and Marcus filed it away for future reference. "Now, where are my bags?" Mrs. Whitmore looked around imperiously. "Charles, where did that driver put our luggage?" Her husband, a man who looked like he'd been manufactured in a country club pro shop, gestured vaguely toward the entrance. "The car service said they'd bring everything in." Julian's eyes swept the lobby and landed on Marcus. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, an assumption, a calculation, a decision made in the span of a heartbeat. "You there?" Julian called out, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Marcus looked up, though he already knew what was coming. "Yes, you with the bag. Could you help Mrs. Whitmore with her luggage? The car service seems to have left everything outside." The lobby seemed to hold its breath. David's eyes widened slightly behind the reception desk, and the woman polishing the brass fixtures glanced up nervously. Mrs. Whitmore was examining her nails, clearly expecting immediate compliance. Marcus felt a familiar sensation, that moment when assumptions collided with reality, when prejudice revealed itself in its most casual form. He could correct Julian right now, could flash his ID and watch the man's face crumble with embarrassment. But something held him back. This was what he had come here to see, wasn't it? This was the real Magnolia Grand, stripped of its careful marketing and polished facade. This was how the resort operated when nobody important was watching. "Of course," Marcus said quietly, setting down his own bag. "Happy to help." Julian's smile returned, satisfied. "Excellent. Mrs. Whitmore has quite a few pieces, so do be careful with them." As Marcus walked toward the entrance, he caught David's eye. The young man looked mortified, clearly wanting to say something but not daring to speak up. Marcus gave him a subtle nod. "It's okay, let it play out." Outside, the car service had indeed left a small mountain of luggage on the sidewalk. Louis Vuitton, Hermes, and brands Marcus didn't even recognize were stacked haphazardly beside the valet stand. He began gathering the bags, noting their weight and expense with each piece he lifted. "Careful with that one." Mrs. Whitmore's voice drifted from behind him. "It contains my jewelry for tonight's dinner." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, hefting what felt like a suitcase full of rocks. As he carried the luggage back inside, Marcus caught fragments of conversation between Julian and Mrs. Whitmore. "The staff is adequately trained, I hope?" "Absolutely, Mrs. Whitmore. We maintain very high standards for behavior and appearance." "Good. Charles and I simply cannot tolerate any complications during our stay." Marcus stacked the luggage carefully on a brass cart, hyper-aware of how invisible he had become. Julian didn't spare him a glance, focused entirely on his important guests. The other hotel staff watched nervously, and Marcus began to understand the dynamic at play here. This wasn't just about customer service, it was about a carefully maintained hierarchy where some people mattered and others simply served. And right now, Julian Prescott had placed Marcus firmly in the second category. "Thank you," Julian said dismissively as Marcus finished loading the cart, already turning back to Mrs. Whitmore. "Someone will take care of that from here." Marcus straightened, brushing imaginary dust from his hands. Around him, the Magnolia Grand hummed with quiet efficiency, servers gliding between tables, housekeeping staff moving like ghosts through the corridors, everyone playing their assigned roles in this theater of Southern hospitality. But Marcus had seen behind the curtain now. He had felt the casual dismissal in Julian's voice, witnessed the way power and privilege created instant hierarchies, observed how easily someone could become invisible in plain sight. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Julian Prescott would learn who he had really been talking to. But tonight, Marcus thought as he retrieved his own modest duffel bag, tonight he would continue to watch and learn. Because sometimes, the most important lessons came when you weren't supposed to be in the classroom at all. The elevator doors closed behind him, and Marcus smiled to himself. Phase 1 was complete. Now the real education could begin. The next morning, Marcus woke before dawn in his garden suite, but instead of ordering room service or heading to the spa like most guests, he had a different plan. He dressed in the same casual clothes from yesterday and made his way to the service corridors he'd observed during his evening exploration. The behind-the-scenes areas of the Magnolia Grand told a starkly different story than the gleaming lobby. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the walls were painted institutional beige, and the carpet was worn thin from countless footsteps. This was where the real work happened, where the magic was manufactured before being presented to guests who preferred not to think about the hands that created their luxury experience. Marcus found what he was looking for near the housekeeping station, a rack of employee polo shirts bearing the resort's logo. He grabbed one in his size, along with a name tag that simply read, "Mike," and transformed himself from guest to worker in less than 2 minutes. "Excuse me, are you new?" Marcus turned to find a woman in her 40s watching him with curious eyes. She was petite but strong-looking, with calloused hands and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her name tag read, "Rosa," and there was something both weary and kind in her expression. "Yeah, just started," Marcus said, hoping his lie sounded natural. "Still figuring everything out." Rosa's face softened. "First day is always tough. I'm Rosa, been here 6 years. What department they got you in?" "General help, I think. Wherever they need me." "Ah, the floating position. That's rough, you'll be running all over the place." She glanced around nervously, then lowered her voice. "Listen, piece of advice? Stay invisible when Mr. Prescott's around. He's been extra cranky lately, and the new guy always gets the worst of it." Before Marcus could respond, a sharp whistle echoed through the corridor. Rosa's entire demeanor changed. Her shoulders tensed, her smile vanished, and she quickly busied herself with sorting towels. "All right, people, listen up." Julian Prescott's voice carried the kind of authority that expected immediate attention. He strode into the service area wearing another expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "We have VIP guests throughout the resort today, which means I expect nothing short of perfection." Marcus positioned himself behind a cart of cleaning supplies, close enough to hear but far enough to remain unnoticed. "The Whitmore party is hosting a brunch for 12 on the terrace. Julian continued. I want our best servers, fresh flowers every hour, and someone stationed nearby at all times in case they need anything. His gaze swept the assembled staff. And remember, smile, serve, and shut up. Your personal problems stay at home. A young man raised his hand tentatively. Marcus recognized him as David from the front desk. Mr. Prescott, about the overtime pay from last week? Not now, David. Julian's voice carried a warning edge. We'll discuss scheduling issues during proper channels. But sir, it's been 3 weeks since. I said not now. Julian's tone turned ice cold. Unless you'd prefer to discuss your employment status instead? David's face flushed, but he lowered his hand. Marcus watched the interaction with growing anger, noting how Julian's public humiliation tactics silenced any further questions from the staff. Now then, Julian continued, his professional smile returning. Rosa, I need you personally handling the presidential suite today. Mrs. Whitmore specifically requested the help that knows how to stay quiet. The way he said it made Marcus's skin crawl. There were layers of meaning in those words that spoke to years of coded language and careful power dynamics. After Julian left, the staff dispersed quickly. Marcus approached David, who was gathering clipboards with shaking hands. Hey, you okay? Marcus asked quietly. David looked up, his eyes reflecting frustration and fear. Fine. Just this job, you know? He glanced around to make sure they were alone. I'm trying to save for college, but with the way they mess with our hours and forget to pay overtime, it's like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. What do you mean, forget? David laughed bitterly. Oh, they're real creative. Clock you out early but make you keep working. Schedule you for 39 hours so you don't qualify for benefits. My favorite is when they dock your pay for uniform infractions that they make up on the spot. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. That's illegal. Yeah, well, try proving it. They've got lawyers, we've got student loans. David picked up his clipboards. Look, Mike, right? Word of advice, keep your head down and don't ask questions. This place chews up people who rock the boat. For the next several hours, Marcus immersed himself in the invisible world of resort labor. He carried luggage up service elevators, restocked towels in guest bathrooms, and fetched drinks from bars that guests never saw. With each task, he observed the careful choreography of inequality that kept the Magnolia Grand running. In the kitchen, he watched as Rosa worked double shifts because they were short-staffed, which really meant management had cut labor costs by running skeleton crews. She moved efficiently between rooms, changing sheets and scrubbing bathrooms while guests lounged on balconies just feet away, completely unaware of her presence. You catching on quick, Rosa told him during a brief break. They sat on milk crates behind the laundry facility, sharing a sandwich Rosa had brought from home because the employee cafeteria charged prices that made eating there a luxury. How long have you been doing this? Marcus asked. 6 years here, 20 years total in hotels. Rosa's voice carried the weight of experience. Used to think hard work meant something. Now I know it just means you're the first when they call when they need extra hours and the last when they remember when it's time for raises. Ever think about leaving? Rosa gestured toward a faded photo taped inside her locker. 2 teenagers in graduation caps. My kids. This job has health insurance, and in this economy, you don't walk away from benefits, even crappy ones. That afternoon, Marcus witnessed Julian in action with guests versus staff. With the wealthy visitors, he was charm personified, remembering drink preferences, arranging special accommodations, practically bowing with each interaction. But when he thought no guests were watching, his demeanor shifted completely. You! Julian snapped at Marcus during the lunch rush. Why are you moving so slowly? The Ashford party is waiting for fresh towels. Marcus had been moving at the same pace as everyone else, but he simply nodded. Yes, sir. And next time, try to look presentable. This isn't some roadside motel. The comment stung not because of its content, but because of the casual way Julian delivered it, as if questioning Marcus's competence and appearance was as natural as breathing. Later, Marcus overheard Julian on the phone in his office. No, we don't need to hire more staff. These people just need proper motivation. Work them harder, not smarter. It's an old philosophy, but it works. Julian laughed at something the person on the other end said. Exactly. They should be grateful to have jobs at all. As the day wore on, Marcus began to understand the unspoken rules that governed the Magnolia Grand. Staff were expected to be grateful for the privilege of working long hours for low pay. Complaints were met with threats of termination. And everyone, from Rosa to David to the kitchen workers, had learned that survival meant silence. But what disturbed Marcus most wasn't just the exploitation, it was how normalized it had become. The staff didn't seem angry anymore, they seemed resigned. Hope had been systematically eliminated, replaced by a grinding acceptance that this was simply how things worked. As the sun set over the Savannah coastline, Marcus made his way back to his suite, his employee polo shirt damp with sweat and his mind racing with plans. Tomorrow's board meeting couldn't come soon enough. He had seen enough. The question now was what he was going to do about it. The Magnolia Grand was about to learn that some people refused to stay invisible forever. The third day started like the others, with Marcus slipping into his borrowed employee polo and joining the morning staff briefing. But there was tension in the air, something brittle and electric that made everyone move a little faster, speak a little quieter. Big day today, Rosa whispered as they organized cleaning supplies. The Charleston Ladies Auxiliary is having their annual luncheon. 30 of the most demanding women in the South, all in one place. Marcus had heard about the event. Julian had been preparing for weeks, drilling the staff on proper etiquette and threatening consequences for even the smallest mistakes. The resort's reputation hung on events like this, wealthy social circles that could make or break a luxury establishment with a single bad review. By noon, the main dining room buzzed with the controlled chaos of high-end service. Women in designer suits and pearl necklaces filled the elegant space, their conversations mixing with the gentle clink of crystal and silver. Marcus moved through the scene like a ghost, refilling water glasses and clearing plates while remaining carefully invisible. At the reception desk, David was handling check-ins for new arrivals when it happened. "Excuse me." The voice cut through the dining room chatter like a siren. A woman in her 60s, dripping with diamonds and righteous indignation, stormed toward the front desk. Marcus recognized her immediately, Mrs. Catherine Ashford, old Savannah money and newer attitude problems. "Yes, Mrs. Ashford?" David straightened, his professional smile firmly in place despite the alarm in his eyes. "My purse, my Louis Vuitton bag, it's missing from my room." Her voice carried across the lobby, drawing stares from other guests. "I left it on the dresser this morning, and now it's gone." David's face went pale. "I'm so sorry to hear that, ma'am. Let me get Mr. Prescott immediately." "Don't you dare move!" Mrs. Ashford's finger jabbed toward him accusingly. "You were the one who brought my extra towels this morning. You were in my room, alone with my belongings." "Ma'am, I would never." "I know exactly what happened here," Mrs. Ashford continued, her voice rising. "These people think they can just take whatever they want from paying guests." The phrase, "these people," hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus felt his hands clench involuntarily as he recognized the coded language, the casual racism wrapped in the thin veneer of class distinction. Julian appeared as if summoned by the commotion, his face a mask of professional concern. "Mrs. Ashford, what seems to be the problem?" "This boy stole my purse," she declared, pointing at David like he was a criminal in a lineup. "I want him arrested immediately." Julian's gaze shifted between the distraught guest and the terrified employee. Marcus could see the calculation happening, wealthy donor versus easily replaceable staff member. The math was simple, and Julian had clearly done it many times before. "David," Julian's voice carried the weight of judgment already rendered. "What do you have to say for yourself?" "Mr. Prescott, I swear I didn't take anything. I delivered the towels, put them in the bathroom, and left immediately. I never even looked at the dresser." "That's exactly what a thief would say," Mrs. Ashford interrupted. I demand you search him right now. Marcus watched David's face crumble. The young man's hands shook as the accusation settled over him like a shroud. Around the lobby, other guests had stopped their conversations to watch the spectacle, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust. David, Julian said coldly, empty your pockets. Now. Sir, please, I didn't. Empty them. The command echoed through the marble lobby. David's face flushed with humiliation as he pulled out his wallet, keys, and phone, setting them on the desk with trembling hands. The assembled guests watched like vultures circling carrion. Marcus couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped forward, his voice calm but clear. Excuse me, but maybe we should check if the purse fell behind the dresser or got moved during housekeeping. Every eye in the lobby turned to him. Julian's expression went from surprise to furious in seconds. I'm sorry, who asked for your opinion? Julian's voice dripped with disdain. This is a serious matter involving theft from our guests. I understand that, Marcus replied evenly. But before we destroy someone's reputation, shouldn't we at least verify that something was actually stolen? Mrs. Ashford's face turned purple. Are you suggesting I'm lying? I'm suggesting we look for other explanations before jumping to conclusions. Julian stepped closer to Marcus, his corporate mask slipping to reveal something ugly underneath. Let me explain something to you. Mike, is it? His eyes raked over Marcus's employee uniform with naked contempt. Some people in this world are born to make decisions, and others are born to carry bags and keep their mouths shut. You clearly fall into the second category. The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus felt the familiar surge of anger, not just at Julian's casual racism, but at the system that allowed men like him to wield power over people like David, like Rosa, like everyone who had to smile and serve and shut up just to survive. So here's what's going to happen, Julian continued, emboldened by Marcus's silence. You're going to go back to whatever menial task you were assigned, and David here is going to be suspended pending a full investigation. Because unlike you, I actually have responsibilities to our real guests. The lobby fell silent except for the gentle splash of the fountain. Marcus could feel the weight of every gaze, the collective held breath of staff and guests alike. This was the moment, the choice between maintaining his cover and standing up for what was right. But before he could respond, Mrs. Ashford's phone rang. Catherine? Where are you, dear? The voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. You left your purse in my car again. I'm bringing it up to your room now. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Ashford's face went from purple to white as she slowly lowered her phone. David's mouth fell open in shock and relief. And Julian. Julian looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on quicksand. That is... Mrs. Ashford stammered, but the damage was done. She had publicly accused an innocent employee of theft, and everyone in the lobby had witnessed it. Julian tried to salvage the situation. Well, that's wonderful news. Just a simple misunderstanding. He forced a laugh that fooled no one. David, please accept my apologies for the confusion. But Marcus saw the truth in Julian's eyes. There was no real apology there, no genuine remorse. Just embarrassment at being caught in his bias, frustration at having his authority questioned, and simmering resentment toward the employee who had dared to speak up. That evening, Marcus sat in his suite with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice tight with controlled anger. Rebecca, I need the board here tomorrow morning. All of them. His legal counsel's voice crackled through the speaker. Marcus, what's wrong? You sound... I'm ending this. Tonight. Get me a full audit of every employee complaint filed in the past year, every labor violation, every HR issue that's been swept under the rug. Marcus stared out at the moonlit ocean, his reflection ghost-like in the window. And Rebecca? Make sure we have documentation for wrongful termination suits. We're going to need them. How many people are we talking about? Marcus thought about David's trembling hands, Rose's resigned exhaustion, the careful way every employee moved through the resort like they were walking through a minefield. All of them, he said quietly. We're going to need protection for all of them. As he hung up the phone, Marcus felt the weight of tomorrow settling on his shoulders. The Magnolia Grand was about to learn that some mistakes couldn't be covered up with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Julian Prescott had finally pushed the wrong person too far. The reckoning was coming. The Magnolia Grand's Crystal Banquet Hall had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Normally reserved for wedding receptions and charity galas, the elegant space with its soaring ceilings and glittering chandeliers now buzzed with nervous energy as the entire resort staff filed in through the service entrance. Rosa clutched her cleaning supplies nervously, whispering to the woman beside her. "Emergency staff meeting at 8 a.m.? That can't be good news." David sat in the back row, still shaken from yesterday's incident. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept much, probably replaying the humiliation in his mind. Around him, housekeepers, kitchen staff, valets, and maintenance workers filled the gilt chairs meant for society weddings, their work uniforms stark against the opulent surroundings. "Anyone know what this is about?" asked James, one of the bellhops. "Layoffs, probably," muttered Maria from the kitchen. "Rich people buy places, first thing they do is cut staff." At exactly 8 o'clock, Julian Prescott strode through the main doors with the confident swagger of a man who believed he controlled every variable in the room. He wore his most expensive suit, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, and his silver hair was styled to perfection. In his hand, he carried a leather portfolio that he set down on the podium with ceremonial importance. "Good morning, everyone," Julian began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to addressing subordinates. "I know this meeting was called on short notice, but we have some exciting news to share about the future of the Magnolia Grand." He paused for effect, scanning the assembled staff with the satisfaction of a general reviewing his troops. "As you know, the hospitality industry is constantly evolving, and successful establishments must adapt to changing market conditions." Julian's corporate speak flowed smoothly, each phrase carefully chosen to sound important while saying nothing. "I'm pleased to announce that the resort has attracted significant new investment from a private equity firm." Murmurs rippled through the staff. Rosa grabbed David's arm. New investors usually meant restructuring, and restructuring usually meant job cuts. "Now I want to assure everyone that your positions are secure," Julian continued, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "However, there will be some operational changes to improve efficiency and maintain our 5-star standards. These new investors expect excellence at every level, and I know I can count on each of you too." The main doors opened again. Julian looked up, annoyed at the interruption, then froze mid-sentence. His face went through a rapid transformation, confusion, recognition, then something approaching panic. Marcus Bell walked into the banquet hall, but this wasn't the casual employee from the past 3 days. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than most staff members made in a month. His shoes were Italian leather, his watch was Swiss precision, and everything about his bearing screamed executive authority. Behind him came 4 people in equally expensive attire, 3 men and 1 woman, all carrying briefcases and wearing the kind of confident expressions that came with corner offices and 7-figure salaries. The lawyers and board members Julian had mentioned were here, all right. They just weren't working for him. The staff began to stir, confusion spreading through the room like ripples in a pond. Rosa squinted at Marcus, her brain struggling to reconcile the man in the $1,000 suit with Mike, who had shared her sandwich behind the laundry facility. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily through the suddenly silent hall. He walked to the podium with the fluid confidence of someone who owned not just the room, but the building around it. Julian's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. What are you? Who is?" Marcus smiled, not the apologetic, invisible expression he'd worn for 3 days, but the kind of smile that corporate boardrooms both feared and respected. "Allow me to introduce myself properly," Marcus said, addressing the staff while keeping his eyes locked on Julian. "My name is Marcus Bell, and I'm the majority shareholder of the Magnolia Grand Resort." The silence that followed was absolute. Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. David sat bolt upright in his chair. Even the chandeliers seemed to stop tinkling. 3 weeks ago, my venture capital firm acquired a controlling 65% stake in this property. Marcus continued, his voice steady and clear. For the past 3 days, I've been here conducting what you might call an undercover assessment of our operations. Julian found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. This is impossible. You were carrying luggage. You were working alongside your staff. Marcus finished. Learning how this resort really operates when the cameras aren't rolling and the board members aren't watching. He turned to address the assembled employees directly, his tone warming. I met some extraordinary people this week. I met Rosa, who works double shifts to support her family while management cuts labor costs. I met David, who was publicly humiliated and falsely accused of theft because someone needed a scapegoat. I met kitchen workers, housekeepers, and maintenance staff who bust their backs to maintain 5-star service while being treated like they're disposable. Rosa began to cry, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being seen, of having her struggles acknowledged by someone with the power to change them. I also observed management practices that range from questionable to illegal. Marcus continued, his voice hardening as he looked back at Julian. Wage theft through systematic overtime violations. Harassment and intimidation of employees who raise legitimate concerns. And yesterday, I witnessed a public character assassination of an innocent employee based on nothing more than prejudice and assumption. Julian's face had gone from pale to gray. He gripped the podium as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Mr. Prescott, Marcus said formally. Effective immediately, your employment with the Magnolia Grand Resort is terminated. Security will escort you from the premises, and you'll receive details about your severance package from our legal team. The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Julian opened his mouth to protest, to argue, to demand explanations, but no sound came out. For the first time in his career, he was truly speechless. As for the rest of you, Marcus said, his voice becoming warm again as he addressed the staff. I want you to know that real changes are coming. Not the kind of changes that make your jobs harder, but the kind that make them sustainable, dignified, and fairly compensated. David raised a trembling hand. Sir, are you really going to fire him? Marcus looked at the young man who had been so terrified just 24 hours ago, and smiled. David, I'm not just firing him. I'm replacing everything he represents. 2 security guards appeared at the banquet hall doors as if summoned by telepathy. Julian looked around desperately, perhaps hoping for support from staff who had never been anything but victims of his management style. He found none. Instead, he saw Rosa sitting straighter in her chair for the first time in years. He saw David's shoulders relaxing as invisible weight lifted from them. He saw an entire room full of people looking at him not with fear or respect, but with the satisfied recognition that justice had finally arrived. As Julian was escorted out, past the marble columns and crystal chandeliers that had been the backdrop for his petty tyrannies, Marcus turned back to the staff with a genuine smile. Now then, he said, let's talk about how we're going to rebuild this place together. The Magnolia Grand was under new management indeed. The silence that followed Julian's departure lasted exactly 37 seconds. Marcus counted them, watching as the reality of what had just happened sank into the minds of 63 employees who had grown accustomed to powerlessness. Then Rosa started laughing. It began as a quiet chuckle, almost inaudible, but it grew stronger and more infectious until other staff members began to smile, then laugh, then openly celebrate. The Crystal Banquet Hall, which had witnessed so many carefully orchestrated events, had never seen anything quite like this spontaneous eruption of relief and joy. I'm sorry, Rosa said, wiping tears from her eyes. It's just 6 years I've been waiting for someone to see what was really happening here. Marcus loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the staff. Well, now I have. And more importantly, now we're going to do something about it. He gestured for everyone to gather closer, abandoning the formal podium setup for something more intimate. I need you all to understand something. Over the next hour, I'm going to ask you questions, and I want completely honest answers. No sugarcoating, no diplomatic corporate speak, and absolutely no fear of retaliation. David shifted nervously in his seat. Sir, with respect, we've heard that before. Management always says they want honesty until you actually give it to them. Fair point, Marcus acknowledged. Which is why my first order of business is establishing an anonymous complaint system with a third-party mediator. Someone completely independent of resort management who reports directly to the board. He pulled out his phone and showed them a contact card. This is Jennifer Martinez from the Southern Labor Rights Center. She'll be here tomorrow to set up the system. A murmur of surprise rippled through the group. This wasn't the usual empty corporate promise. This was actionable, immediate change. But before we get to formal systems, Marcus continued, I want to hear from you directly. What are the biggest problems you face working here? And please don't hold back. The floodgates opened. The scheduling is insane, said Maria from housekeeping. They give us 40-hour weeks on paper but make us work 50, then claim we're part-time so we don't get benefits. The uniform policy is designed to nickel and dime us, added James from valet services. They charge us for replacements but don't provide adequate storage, so our clothes get damaged or stolen. The break room vending machines charge tourist prices, called out someone from the kitchen. $3 for a bottle of water when you're working 12-hour shifts. Marcus listened intently, taking notes on his phone and asking follow-up questions. With each revelation, his expression grew more determined. Okay, let's start addressing these immediately, he said. First, effective today, all employees working more than 35 hours per week will be classified as full-time with complete benefits. No exceptions, no loopholes. The room went silent again, but this time it was the silence of people afraid to believe good news. Second, the resort will provide 3 sets of uniforms per employee at no cost, with free cleaning and replacement as needed. Third, the employee break areas will be completely renovated with subsidized food service. Nothing will cost more than what you'd pay at a convenience store in town. Rosa raised her hand tentatively. Mr. Bell, sir, that sounds wonderful. But how do we know these changes will stick? What happens when you leave and someone else takes over day-to-day operations? It was exactly the question Marcus had been hoping for. I'm glad you asked, Rosa. Because that brings me to the most important change of all. He smiled, and for the first time since entering the banquet hall, he looked genuinely excited. We're promoting from within. Rosa, I'm offering you the position of head of housekeeping operations, with full management authority and a salary increase of 40%. Rosa's hand flew to her chest. What? Me? But I don't have management experience. You have 6 years of experience doing the actual work and training new employees, Marcus interrupted. You know every room in this resort, every process, every shortcut, and every problem. Most importantly, you know how to treat people with respect. That's worth more than any MBA. The applause that erupted was genuine and sustained. Rosa was beloved by the staff, and seeing her succeed felt like validation for everyone who had been overlooked and undervalued. David, Marcus continued, I understand you're saving for college. My foundation provides full scholarships to hospitality management programs. If you're interested, we'll cover tuition, books, and living expenses at any accredited university in Georgia. The only requirement is that you consider returning here after graduation, not as an obligation, but as an opportunity. David's composure finally cracked. The young man who had been publicly humiliated just yesterday was now being offered a future he had only dreamed about. Tears streamed down his face as the other employees cheered. But here's what I want you all to understand, Marcus said, his voice carrying over the celebration. These aren't charity gestures or feel-good publicity moves. This is how successful businesses actually operate. You can't build excellence on a foundation of exploitation. He gestured toward the elegant surroundings, the crystal chandeliers, the marble columns, the oil paintings of Confederate generals that would be quietly removed by the end of the week. True luxury isn't about making some people feel superior to others. It's about creating an environment where everyone, guests and staff alike, can experience the best version of hospitality. When our employees are respected, supported, and fairly compensated, that shows in every interaction they have with guests. Maria from the kitchen raised her hand. What about the guests who expect us to be invisible? Who want the old way of doing things? Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Those guests will learn to adapt or find accommodations elsewhere. The Magnolia Grand will maintain its 5-star standards, but we'll achieve them through excellence, not exploitation. Any guest who can't treat our staff with basic human dignity isn't welcome here, regardless of how much money they have. The transformation in the room was palpable. Backs straightened, voices grew stronger, and for the first time in years, the staff of the Magnolia Grand looked like people who were proud of where they worked. One last thing, Marcus said as the meeting wound down. These changes start today, but they're just the beginning. We'll be conducting regular feedback sessions, implementing profit-sharing programs, and creating clear advancement pathways for every position in the resort. As staff began filing out, energized and chattering excitedly about the future, Rosa approached Marcus with tears still in her eyes. Mr. Bell, I need to ask you something. Yesterday, when you were working with us, was any of that real? Marcus smiled, remembering the sandwich they'd shared behind the laundry facility. Rosa, that was the most real I'd felt in years. Everything else, the suits, the boardrooms, the corporate meetings, that's just what I do. But these past 3 days? That's who I am. The Magnolia Grand was about to discover what happened when you built a business on respect instead of fear. The revolution had begun. 3 days later, the Magnolia Grand hummed with a different kind of energy. It was still the same luxury resort with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, but something fundamental had shifted in its DNA. Staff moved through the halls with straight backs and genuine smiles. Conversations between employees and guests carried warmth instead of servile fear. The change was so palpable that returning guests commented on it, though they couldn't quite put their finger on what was different. Marcus stood in what had been Julian's office, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as maintenance workers carefully removed the oil paintings of Confederate generals from the lobby walls. In their place would hang artwork from local artists, vibrant paintings of Savannah's diverse community, and the natural beauty of coastal Georgia. The office itself was being completely transformed. Julian's heavy mahogany desk and leather-bound intimidation props were being replaced with a round conference table and comfortable chairs. The new head of operations, a position that would be filled by promoting David after he completed his accelerated management training, would work in a space designed for collaboration, not hierarchy. Mr. Bell? Marcus turned to find Rosa in the doorway, but she looked nothing like the exhausted housekeeper he met just a week ago. She wore a crisp business suit, her first, purchased with her management salary, and carried herself with the confidence of someone whose expertise was finally being recognized. The afternoon staff meeting went well, she reported. Everyone's excited about the new profit-sharing program. Maria asked if she could take some business classes at the community college, and James wants to train for event management. Marcus smiled. Make it happen. Education budget is unlimited for any employee who wants to grow. Rosa nodded, then hesitated. There's something else. Mrs. Whitmore called. She heard about the changes, and wanted to book her usual suite for next month. And I told her we'd be happy to accommodate her, but that she'd need to treat our staff with the same respect she expects for herself. Rosa's grin was infectious. She hung up. Good, Marcus said without hesitation. We'll fill that suite with guests who understand that luxury and basic human decency aren't mutually exclusive. The resort's reservations had actually increased since word spread about the changes. Apparently, there were more people who preferred staying at establishments that treated their workers well than Marcus had expected. The Magnolia Grand's reputation was evolving from exclusive to ethical, and it was turning out to be excellent for business. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. David appeared, looking nervous but determined. Sir, I wanted to thank you again for the scholarship opportunity. I've been accepted to the University of Georgia's hospitality program, and I can start in the spring semester. That's fantastic, David. And remember, this isn't charity. You've earned this through your character and work ethic. The resort is investing in its future by investing in you. David's smile could have powered the entire building. I won't let you down, sir. I know you won't. And David? When you come back, you'll be walking through the front door as management, not sneaking through service corridors. Never forget the difference. As evening approached, Marcus packed his belongings in the same black duffel bag he'd arrived with. His work here was far from over. Real cultural change took years, not days, but the foundation was solid. The new management structure was in place, the policy changes were implemented, and most importantly, the staff believed that their voices mattered. He made his way toward the lobby for the last time, but stopped short when he reached the main corridor. A line of employees had formed along both sides of the hallway, not the rigid, fearful formation they might have created for Julian, but a warm gathering of people who genuinely wanted to say goodbye. There was Rosa, standing proudly in her new role. David clutching acceptance letters from 3 different universities. Maria from the kitchen, already enrolled in business classes. James from valet services, sporting a new assistant event coordinator name tag. Dozens of workers whose names Marcus had learned, whose stories he'd heard, whose futures were now brighter because someone had finally listened. But this wasn't the formal protocol of employees honoring a superior. This was family seeing off someone who had shown them that dignity wasn't a privilege to be earned, it was a right to be respected. As Marcus walked between them, hands reached out not to serve him, but to shake his hand, to pat his shoulder, to share quiet words of gratitude. Rosa fell into step beside him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You know what the best part is? She said softly. My kids can visit me at work now without me being ashamed of how I'm treated. Near the entrance, workers were installing a new plaque beside the main doors. The brass plate gleamed under the crystal sconces, its message simple but revolutionary. Under new leadership. Rooted in respect. Marcus paused at the reception desk where a young bellhop, one of the new hires brought in under the reformed employment practices, waited with professional courtesy but without subservience. May I help you with your bag, sir? The young man asked. Marcus looked at him for a moment, remembering another bellhop request that had started this entire journey. But this time, the offer came from someone who was fairly paid, properly trained, and treated with dignity. This time, it was a choice, not an assumption. I'd appreciate that, thank you, Marcus said, handing over his duffel bag with a smile. The difference was everything. As the brass doors opened before him, Marcus walked out into the savannah evening with his head high and his conscience clear. Behind him, the Magnolia Grand continued its transformation, not just of policies and procedures, but of hearts and minds. He had arrived invisible and unnoticed, mistaken for someone whose only value was in service to others. But he was leaving unforgettable, having proven that true leadership wasn't about commanding respect, it was about creating an environment where respect flowed in every direction. The valet brought his rental car around, and as Marcus drove away from the resort, he caught one last glimpse in his rearview mirror. Through the glowing windows of the lobby, he could see staff members talking and laughing together, their workday ending not in exhaustion but in satisfaction. The Magnolia Grand would never be the same. And for the first time in its history, that was exactly as it should be. Some revolutions happened with dramatic fanfare and public declarations. Others happened quietly, one respectful interaction at a time, until the entire world had shifted on its axis. Marcus Bell had chosen the second kind. And it would last forever.